Hello, Warrior fans. This is Scott back again for another edition of DUBS Playoff Watch. We are truly nearing the end of the regular season, and as we talked about the entire span of these last 3 to 4 weeks, it has been close every day. Constant adjustments. Currently, the Warriors have a half game lead on the Grizzlies, and we'll take a look at that in a second. But real quick, Warriors did what they needed to do the last two games against OKC. They should have beaten them, and they did beat them. They destroyed them this very last game, which was on Saturday. On Thursday night, it was 118-97 over the Thunder, and then Steph scored 49 and hit 11 threes on Saturday's game, which ended up being 136-97. Let's take a look at that real quick. There was a lot of this going on.
Draymond between his legs. Curry's got 41. Mulder will push, find Curry again. It basically is saying, wait, he backed up on him and hit another three. Paisley fell asleep. He thought he did his job.
There was a lot of that going on. Again, Steph hit 11 threes. The Warriors actually set a franchise record and hit 27 threes that game. So they have been doing very well. Steph has been very hot, which is what we need because they are playing the Jazz and the Suns, the number 1 and number 2 teams respectively in the Western Conference at this moment, and that is one way or another, either 2-1 or 1-2. That's the way it's going to end when the season ends. There's only 4 games remaining for most of the teams. There are 5 for a few of them, and we'll go over that. But Steph, let's see. Like I said, he had 49 Saturday. He had 34 points against also OKC on Thursday. Against the Pelicans on Tuesday, he had 37. And on Monday against the Pelicans, that was May the 3rd, he had 41. And against Houston, he had 30 and only 30 minutes played. So most of these games, even with the 49, he didn't play the fourth quarter. He only played 29 minutes. So can he keep it up? It's a lot to ask of a human being, of a man. But we know Steph is no ordinary man. He's amazing. And right now, he is in the lead with 31.9 points per game for the NBA scoring leader. And at this point in time, looks like Bradley Beal is at 31.4. Now, he just hit 50. When Steph hit 49, Beal hit 50. So, in his last game. So, incredible competition. Both of them just having outstanding seasons, to say the least. And looks like Beal may miss his next 2 games due to hamstring strain and or injuries. And you know how hamstrings go. He could miss more games, and Wizards only have 4 or 5 games remaining in the regular season as well, and they are battling to hold that 9th spot and maybe try to jump to that 8th spot. So that will be very interesting to watch as well. Let's take a look at a post-game interview from Steph in regards to possible play-in tournament against the Lakers as it stands at the moment. And again, we'll get to the standings here shortly. By the way, I do want to mention that, of course, the Warriors television broadcasters, Bob Fitzgerald and Kalena Azubuike, were doing the play-by-play in those highlights that we just saw. And that's always enjoyable. So let's go to Steph's post-game interview. Interesting comments.
I think the league might enjoy Lakers Warriors 7-8 in the play-in. That's a meme.
So pretty hilarious. Thought I would share that with you. No comments are the comments from Steph about stating the obvious. The Lakers and the Warriors, yes. The fans and the league would love to see that as a play-in game. So let's take a look at that. I think it would be best to go to that now. It's a nice segue into a depiction of what that tournament actually is going to look like. So assuming the teams end up in the spots that they're in currently, as you can see in the West, the 7th and 8th teams would play each other in the first game, and that would be the Lakers versus the Warriors or vice versa. The winners of that particular game would drop down and play the Phoenix Suns as the number 2 team. The loser would play the winner between, in this case, the Grizzlies and the Spurs. And then the winner coming out of that game would play the Utah Jazz, in the first round. Now let's just jump over to the East real quick. You can see the Wizards and the Pacers still in the 9th and 10th spots. The winner of that particular game would play the loser between the Celtics and the Hornets game, and the loser of the Celtics versus the Hornets, they would drop and play the second place Bucks, where the winner of that last play-in game between the 9-10 winner and the 7-8 loser, they would have the wonderful privilege of playing the 76ers. So, thought you would enjoy that if you haven't seen this yet. It's interesting as it's slightly different than the current playoff mode that the NBA has had for a few years. Not just the play-in part, but typically the one would play the 8, the 2 would play the 7. In this case, instead of having, say, the 7 play the 10, or the 8 play the 9, they actually have the 7 and 8 play each other and the 9 and 10 play each other before going into the winner versus the loser of that particular playoff, if you will. So, most interesting. All right, let's take a look at the current standings. So, as I mentioned, we are coming to the end, as you can see, when it comes to the end of the regular season, that is. And the Warriors, just with a half a game lead still on the Grizzlies, in that 8th spot. And the Grizzlies now with a 2-game lead on the Spurs in the 10th. The critical piece there, 9th, 10th, is for those teams, whoever that ends up being, and hopefully it's not the Warriors, but is keeping the Pelicans and or even the Kings out. You can see there, Spurs still only with a game and a half lead on the Pelicans, and then also 2.5 on the Kings. So I'm not going to rule out the Kings entirely, because yes, it's just mathematically possible that they could get in. If you look at the Kings, they're 7-3 still over the last 10. They still are playing extremely well, and the Spurs are 4-6. Pelicans also playing at a 60% clip. They're 6-4. The Warriors are 6-4. The Lakers, big win yesterday. Anthony Davis, 41 or 42 points yesterday, but they still are just 3-7 over their last 10. So they desperately need to keep it up. They're only trailing the Blazers by a game, but the Blazers are 7-3 over the last 10, and the Blazers, who trail the Mavericks by just a game, the Mavericks are 8-2, and they've won 4 in a row. The Blazers won 3 in a row, and the Lakers broke their losing streak by winning yesterday. So still really close, but the way things are shaping up, um, things could still change mathematically since things are so close. But with the way the Mavericks are playing, the Blazers are playing, it doesn't look like the Lakers are going to overcome that. However, obviously, you never know. If key injury here, there, depending on what team, everything changes really quick in the NBA. The Warriors play. This is huge. They play, as I mentioned earlier, the Jazz today, and then the Suns tomorrow. Again, the 1 and 2 teams in the Western Conference. And these are huge games for the Warriors. They have got to win these games to stay ahead of the Grizzlies, because the Grizzlies are playing the Pelicans today. Who would you rather play? The Suns, the Jazz, or the Pelicans? I know who I would rather play. Now, tomorrow, the Grizzlies have to play the Mavericks. And the Mavericks, as we just showed, playing and continue to show, is playing extremely well and are very hot. But then the Grizzlies jump into back-to-back games with the Kings, as they have 5 games remaining. And then the last game is against the Warriors. So the Warriors and the Grizzlies are going to go off against each other on Sunday, May the 16th. And yes, that is going to be something, to say the least. So the Warriors, once again, they play the Jazz today, they play the Suns tomorrow, they play the Pelicans Friday, and they play the Grizzlies on Sunday. So you can get a sense from looking at the standings how everybody is playing, where they are positioned, and what that can mean to everyone. Very, very interesting, very tight race. Okay, so I got to tell you, it looks very interesting for the other teams battling for playoff positions in the West, looking at their remaining games. So let's go over that real quick, and I'm just going to try and talk you through it as quickly as I can. So let's start with the 10th place team. Let's start with the Spurs. And as we mentioned, the Spurs are 2 games behind the Grizzlies, and they're just a game and a half ahead of the Pelicans, and they are just 2.5 ahead of the Kings. So who do the Spurs have left? What does their remaining schedule look like? Very difficult for the Spurs. So they play the Bucks today. Then they play the Nets Wednesday. Then they play the Knicks, one of the best defenses in the league, and also able to put up points on Thursday. So back-to-back against the Nets, and then the Knicks, and then the last 2 games of the season for the Spurs are both against the Suns. So now if the Suns are still battling for that first playoff spot, now it comes down to whether they see a huge advantage to trying to get that first spot versus just settling for the second spot and giving their stars rest so that they're ready to go into the playoffs. I mean, that's different teams view those different teams and players view those things differently. But man, those are huge games, tough games. Some of the best teams in the league the Spurs have on their schedule. Now, I'm going to skip over the Pelicans. Zion injured his finger. He's out. Is he going to miss the remaining games? Possibly. Likely. So, and certainly that's not to say the Pelicans won't compete. They competed well the other night. But I don't see them really making a run at it. But I'm going to skip over them. I'm going to go to the Kings. Obviously, Northern California team. I'm more focused on them anyway. Who do the Kings have left? They play the Thunder tomorrow. Then they play the Grizzlies back-to-back. They play them Thursday and then Friday. huge, huge games for not only the Grizzlies, but the Kings as well. And then they do end up having to play the Jazz, their final game, on Sunday, May the 16th. But that by far is going to be their toughest game. And again, if the Jazz have a 2-game lead on the last game of the season, they may let their stars rest. So if the Kings have any shot of getting in by their last game, you know they're going to be getting after it that particular game. And again, they have been playing well and have a good clip going with 7-3 in their last 10 games. So now let's go to the Lakers, Blazers, Mavericks. Lakers. Who the Lakers have left? Because they are trailing the Blazers just by a single game. The Lakers, they play the Knicks tomorrow. Again, tough team. But then they play the Rockets. Now, Rockets got good young players, but they're, going to be tough for them to get up with 3 games left in the season for them. They don't have anything to play for other than pride. And then the Lakers play the Pacers, who are in a tussle for a playoff spot in the East. And then the Lakers end with the Pelicans on the last game of the season. So not the toughest schedule of remaining games at all. The Lakers should do well with those remaining games. Now, is LeBron going to play in any of those games? Very questionable. Don't know. If they desperately need a win, maybe he's healthy enough to be able to play. Again, don't know. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. The Blazers, they play the Rockets today, but then they play the Jazz, then the Suns, and then the Nuggets. They play the top 3 teams going at it in the West. Wow, the Jazz, the Suns, and the Nuggets. So they can get by the Rockets today. Now, this could be a trap game, right? They got that team in there, and this is going to be easy. Just even though they're going to do their best not to think that way, they can't help it because they're humans. You can't help but think that way. And the Rockets are, they're playing for pride. They got good young players. They're probably going to be getting after it. They would love to upset teams like this. But then the Blazers, Wednesday, the Jazz, Thursday, back-to-back, the Suns. And then they end on Sunday, May the 16th, with the Nuggets. That's a tough, tough schedule. So, if the Lakers take care of business, they may be able to come up and not only tie the Blazers, but overtake them. That would be most interesting. And then that could drop them into the 7/8 playoff spot against our beloved Warriors. Let's look at the Mavericks. The Mavericks, by far the easiest set of games remaining of all these contenders. The Mavericks, tomorrow they play the Grizzlies. We would love for them to beat the Grizzlies. And then they play the Pelicans. Again, likely without Zion. Then they play the Raptors, who are out of the playoff run in the East. And then they end against the Timberwolves. So the Mavericks should maintain their playoff position. Now, having said that, for all of you knowledgeable fans out there, Luka, he got ejected from the game yesterday for it was unintentional low blow, but he did react to one of the Cavaliers trying to box him out from behind unexpectedly while he was under the hoop. Now, I'm going to read some information here. It says, so 2 technical fouls against Luka Doncic. Gave him 15 for the season. It leaves him 1 away from an automatic suspension. So he's got 1 game if they receive 16. They're suspended for 1 game if they receive 16 technical fouls in the regular season. And every 2 Ts after that results in another 1-game suspension. But at the end of the regular season, all technicals are wiped out, and players and coaches start with a fresh slate for the playoffs. Now, he has promised to be on his best behavior, and I guess, post-game interview. He won't get another. And then it subsequently says that apparently flagrant fouls were not part of the deal. Lucky for him, flagrants don't count towards the accumulation of technicals, which means that he won't face an automatic suspension from this incident. Now, whether he will face any other punishment from the league remains to be seen. So we're assuming that he will continue to play the remaining games of the Mavericks unless something else comes out as a result of what happened. Which I think is unlikely at this point, but you never know. So it's going to be a very interesting close to the season, as we've been predicting all along, which is why we've been watching this stuff so closely. And let's finish up with some updates. And there's nothing truly of great interest here that, we are very interested, but there's no exceptional amount of knowledge that we are receiving here in terms of reports for Pascal. Like, what is up with Eric Pascal? He's got a hip injury, so it's serious. But the updates have been few and far between. The latest is he's not going to play today against the Jazz. Not a surprise because we really haven't heard that much. We know he's only played in 2 games since mid-March. It's still very questionable as to whether he'll make it back for any of the remaining games to close out the season. And so that's the latest that I could find on my research into Pascal's injury and his status. As for Kelly Oubre, so good news is, they mentioned this a few days ago, that it looks like he's not going to require surgery and or not going to have surgery. But he's still in a lot of pain on that wrist and hand, and he still has some fractures there, not to mention torn ligaments. So, really it's a pain tolerance thing, and there's just too much going on there to expect him to be able to really perform. As I mentioned, he's only human. Like, to go out there with that kind of pain and injury, and this is just not pain, it's an injury. So I would not expect him personally to show up and play in any of these remaining games. But who knows what's going to happen. If he does, holy smokes, kudos to Kelly Oubre. But if the Warriors can maintain and, he can rest a few more days, which would equate to a couple of games at the end of the season so that he could be ready for maybe the play-in tournament. And when I say ready, I mean very loosely. Again, I don't expect him to fully be healthy with that kind of injury and to heal on its own for at least another month, to be honest. Right? That is going to take time. Every time he touches a basketball, gets a rebound, slaps his hands against the ball, receives a hard pass, tries to flex that wrist and use that hand just when shooting. That could re-injure it, cause more pain again, and it just doesn't look good. The outlook does not look good. So we wish Oubre the best. We wish Pascal, the best. We'd like to see Damian Lee back in the lineup here, hopefully soon. So got our fingers crossed on that. So before signing off today, I did want to go over just the critical games today and the critical games tomorrow. Some of these we mentioned briefly, but let's just go through them real quick. So I already mentioned the Dubs versus the Jazz today. Also, Pelicans versus the Grizzlies. Spurs versus the Bucks. The Blazers versus the Rockets. And the Wizards versus the Hawks. Let's talk about the Wizards real quick. Trying to make a run. Trying to jump into that 8th spot. Hornets are there currently. Westbrook's going off. Triple-double monster. Consistently. No question. Hall of Fame player. One of the greatest point guard athletes ever in the history of the NBA. Finish at the bucket. Rebounding monster. And yes, can get assists. But he's never been a great shooter. Continues to not be a great shooter. Not a great defender. With all that athleticism, he should be maybe arguably the best defender, point guard defender, arguably, in the league. But he's not even in the discussion. IQ. For those of you who saw that game against Pacers, went in overtime. Yep, Wizards won it. Yep, he hit free throws, but he took a horrible shot in overtime. He was not fouled. His arms came down on the defender, and they called a foul and put him on the free throw line. That should have never happened. In regulation, he had the ball. Wizards had the ball with, I want to say, 25 plus seconds remaining in the game. And instead of holding it, and I could be off a little bit, but 2 seconds or more on how many seconds were left. It was definitely more than 24 seconds. But instead of holding it for the last shot and leaving the Pacers with under 3 seconds left, maybe 2 seconds, to get their shot off, he goes ahead and drives and makes a wonderful shot, but it was tough. It was over a defender. Ball bounced on the rim once or twice before it fell in. And basically it was a 1-on-3 down the middle of the lane. You've been in the league that many years and you are not trying to hold the ball for the last possession to get the best shot possible. Maybe that was the best shot. It was lucky to have fallen in. Beal was smoking. You didn't try to get him set up in a half-court offense and run the clock down and then leave the Pacers hardly any time. As it was, and it ended up, it gave the Pacers, I want to say 20 plus seconds left. They had the last possession. They could have easily hit a 3 and won that game in regulation, but they didn't. They tied it, and they went in overtime. And then the Wizards ended up winning, obviously, by 1 point because of the horrible officiating on that last possession. Regardless, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but not anywhere close to being the best point guard in the league. So let's stop that debate right now. All right, moving on. Tomorrow, Dubs versus Suns, as already mentioned. Lakers versus Knicks, as already mentioned. Nuggets versus the Hornets. Hornets trying to hang on to that 8th spot in the East. The Heat versus the Celtics. You saw the Heat beat the Celtics this weekend. They play again. Huge game, except that the Celtics now have fallen 2 to 3 games behind the Heat. Unlikely that they are going to catch them. The Sixers versus the Pacers. The Pacers fell behind the Wizards as a result of that game. And so they are in the 10th spot right now. And the Mavs versus the Grizzlies, as we mentioned. Huge games today, huge games tomorrow. The end of the season is crazy. So enjoy it. And thank you again for joining this edition of Dubs Playoff Watch. Take care of yourselves, and everybody stay healthy out there.